guys, it's Emmy, and I am going to dive into the concept of hard work and how it pays off here in America. When I grew up in the 1990s, I was always told that if you worked hard, if you got a college education, that you would be successful. And yet, I didn't really see that pan out as I grew up, and I really want to find out why. So to best highlight my case, I have several charts I want everyone to see. To start, I found this chart very illuminating because if you see, after about 1980, which was about 10 years before I was born, and just slowly increasing is this gap between the bottom 90 and the top 10%. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing how all the wealth is concentrated at the top, but I'm not just going to talk about that. I want to know why. So let's start by going to the bottom and look at what the bottom rung of society looks like, which would be minimum wage, of course. Now, America's federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, which is pretty pitiful compared to the top wages. And in fact, out of 20 developed countries with the highest minimum wage, America comes at number 17. It's not very good, not exactly indicative of the greatest country in the world. So let's step away from minimum wage because everyone says that if you want to be successful, you need to get a college education. So let's look to see what the wages are like for those college educated folks. It's not really looking that great. And in fact, it seems that at one point it was a lot higher, about $20 an hour back in the 90s. But yet now it's about $15 an hour, which is what most people on my side of the spectrum, I guess, would say the minimum wage should be, which really isn't a lot when you think about inflation. So many will argue that minimum wage was never meant to be a livable wage. So let's dive into that for a moment. When minimum wage was set, it was set by the Fair Labor Standard Act in 1938 by FDR. And FDR was quoted saying, whenever people scrutinized the bill back then, "Do not let any calamity-howling executive with an income of $1,000 a day tell you that a wage of $11 a week is going to have a disastrous effect on all of American industry." And upon sending the bill to Congress, he said this: "Today, you and I are pledged to take further steps to reduce the lag in the purchasing power of industrial workers and to strengthen and stabilize the markets for the farmers' products. Our nation, so richly endowed with natural resources and with a capable and industrious population, should be able to devise ways and means of ensuring to all our able-bodied working men and women a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. All but the hopelessly reactionary will agree that to conserve our primary resources of manpower, government must have some control over maximum hours, minimum wages, the evil of child labor, and the exploitation of unorganized labor." So I guess really the question that you have to ask then is what he meant by a living wage. And to anyone who says that minimum wage was never meant to be a living wage, I would say it's pretty laughable when you hear this quote: "In my inaugural, I laid down the simple proposition that nobody is going to starve in this country. It seems to me to be equally plain that no business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country. By business, I mean the whole of commerce as well as the whole of industry. By workers, I mean all workers, the white-collar class as well as men in the overalls. And by living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean the wages of a decent living. Throughout industry, the change from starvation wages and starvation employment to living wages and sustained employment can in large part be made by an industrial covenant to which all employers shall subscribe." So I would say he definitely expected minimum wage to be a standard of living that wasn't just barely getting by as it is today, if that. So why are these companies not paying us? Well, the truth is that for companies to pay us, they have to make a certain amount of profit to pass it on to us. So if we're not making enough, perhaps it's because we're not a productive workforce. So I wanted to look at productivity and how it has changed since the 90s. So it seems productivity has actually gone up quite a bit. However, hourly compensation has not. In fact, we see productivity peaking in 2013 at 243%, while hourly compensation only at 108, though it kept even at least until about 1973. So what happened? That's very interesting. What other factors would play into what the companies can pay us? Maybe the people at the top aren't making enough, even though the first chart seemed to not really express that. The CEOs of the company must not make too much more than their workers, right? Well, let's see. Oh no, just 296 times what a typical worker earns. That's a lot. And yet again, we see that gets really high at, my birth year, 1990. Just goes up from there. So what happened? What is it that is making this gap? What can we look at concretely that can actually maybe fix it? Maybe truly address this issue? I think the best answer I could find is in my final chart. Big reveal. Decline in union membership mirrors income gains of the top 10%. So this is very obvious, guys. What happened? There's no more collective bargaining in the workforce. These workers do not have a voice. And honestly, the people that continue to say things like it was never meant to be a living wage, or my favorite, let's for teenagers to work at McDonald's at 6 in the morning when they're supposed to be at school. No, it's not. We all know this. And the truth is that every single industry should have union membership. That's the only way that anything will actually be done. My husband used to worry about unions because he heard a lot of different propaganda, and since kind of waking up to it, it just seems like the obvious answer, and I just hope that everybody else can see. And I think that this chart really says it all, because as you see, just as the union membership goes down, so does the income going to the top. Cause and effect. It's very simple. And I found it for you guys. I've taken the time, and you're welcome. And thank you for listening.